Welcome to the We Are All God podcast, where the inner journey is simplified. I'm Erin Werley.
And I'm Philip Werley.
And you are more powerful than you've ever imagined. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today we have a special guest with us, Ricky Wilson from the Power of You Coaching, who is a member inside my Ascension Portal group. And after watching one of the first podcast episodes, he sent a message through, and as he was talking and sharing his story, I was just feeling so deeply called to have him on the podcast and have him share his story with you, because it is powerful. It is incredible. It is magical. It is all the things. And then when I got to the very end of his message, he said, I am creating or manifesting, or whatever your words were, Ricky, that I'm going to be on your podcast. And I was like, oh, perfect, divine alignment. Let's do it. And it's like, I don't know, a week and a half later, and here we are. So we are so honored to have you on here with us today, Ricky.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be here and be a part of your group. It's beautiful. It's just an amazing space.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So please share with us the story that brought you here today. The story that I know, it's like we are each given a story. Each of us, every single human on earth has things that they have overcome, has the pathway that has brought them back within. Now, not everybody recognizes this. Not everybody has the guts to share their story. And anyway, please just dive in and share your story with us.
Sure, absolutely. And it's taken me a few years to really speak out, to get the courage to talk about it and everything that's happened. But in 2017, I started to get some symptoms. And I noticed, I was losing sensation in my legs. And so like anything, I went to the doctor and I had blood tests done. And they didn't know what was going on. So they just kept referring me from doctor to doctor. And, over the course of 2 years, I saw over 13 doctors. I was progressively getting worse, and without any answer. And I was being treated like a human pincushion, I call it. Yeah, just blood test after blood test weekly. And it got to be a very scary journey, because then the mind starts to go, well, what do I have? Am I dying? It just starts to continue on. But to make a longer story shorter, in August of 2019, I discovered that I had chronic Lyme disease. And I was devastated but relieved at the same time to have a diagnosis. But I was progressively getting worse. I feared becoming, ended up in a wheelchair, dying before my time. I had 2 little girls. I was nowhere near the person I desired to be, the husband, the father. I was tired all the time. I had terrible insomnia, anxiety, depression, panic attacks, severe pain. I was ready. Depression is something I've struggled with all my life, and thoughts of suicide. And I was getting close to that. I was getting ready to, I'd shared with my wife that I was getting ready to make goodbye videos for my kids. And then a few weeks after I was diagnosed finally, and I continued just to get worse, all the treatment, nothing was helping. My 4-year-old, my youngest daughter was 4 at the time. She asked my wife, will Daddy ever be happy again? And that hit me in some kind of way. And it really sparked something within me. And I just decided, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to beat this. And not only am I going to beat it, I'm going to use it to my advantage. I'm going to become 120% better. I was sitting in this chair in this office when my wife shared it, and I just said, you know what? I'm doing this. And all along, I was, give a little background here. I was not a spiritual person at all. I had no idea power of the subconscious mind or anything like that. So I preface that because I had no idea what was taking place. So I had set my mind that I was going to become 120% better. I started to notice changes almost immediately, not in my physical health, but I started to change my habits. I started to eat differently. I was doing a lot of treatments. I started to drop some off. But the biggest thing is I started to embrace the journey. I remember specifically, I was getting up like a 90-year-old man. There was days I could hardly get out of bed. And I was walking around the kitchen holding onto the countertops because it was so hard to walk. And my wife was just devastated for me. I'm so sorry that you're experiencing this. And I said, no, it's okay. It's teaching me. And that's just a moment that really stood out. And after a few weeks, I noticed physical changes. My symptoms started to subside. When I had a panic attack, instead of fearing it, they're very scary, I just started to tell myself my body's healing faster. I started to love the pain. And I know a lot of people go, how can you love the pain? Well, it was just like I was doing the opposite of what I was doing before. And I had no idea why I was doing these things at the time. And then ultimately, after 4 weeks, I got to a point where I didn't even care if I was sick or not anymore. My perception of life had changed. All my life, I'd looked outside of me for happiness, for fulfillment, for achievement, the bigger house, the car, all of these things. And I realized I had everything already, but I still felt weighed down by life. I always have this, kind of old black and white cartoon image in my head of somebody walking along with a backpack and just stacking the backpack higher and higher and higher. That felt like me. I just was weighed down by life. So I was outside in the yard one day on a nice October day. And, with that weight, I just said, you know what? I'm just done with all of this. God, I surrender everything to you. And I just gave up everything. And that's a moment I will never forget that changed my life in a seemingly blink of an eye. In that moment, I was instantly healed. I experienced a spontaneous healing. My body filled with energy, just became pure energy. And the veil was dropped. And while it felt like a physical second, I experienced what I call like a life review. It was like a near-death experience. It's the best way I have to explain it, but I didn't die. My wife thinks I got electrocuted or something, but I was shown I experienced so much, and I could look back through my life and understood that I lived in a place of fear, of not feeling worthy, of not being enough, of judging myself harshly. And I remember just the overwhelming love that I experienced. And there's just no description I can give of this love I was embraced by, that God did not judge. And that's what I was taught my entire life. And God was not judging me. I was judging myself. And the choices I had made, everything that happened in my life was perfect, but my perception of it and me holding on to the anger, the resentment, the fear led me to getting sick. And that we're in this beautiful, amazing time of ascension, that we're shifting right now. And all of this was happening for a purpose. And it showed me to just embrace and love and surrender to this beautiful, amazing life. And I experienced the new earth. I didn't physically see it. It's hard to describe, but I knew I was one with everything and everybody instantly, and that I was loved beyond all measure, that there is no right and wrong. It's all perception, and that this is an illusion. And I was instantly healed. And the very first words that came out of my mouth while I was still standing outside was, life's all on me. And I ran in and told my wife what had happened, and I just had understandings of things that I had no previous teachings of. And it was all for a purpose to help others and to hold space and to transmute this energy and to help during this time. And that I had the ability to heal from within all along. And that I was already the person I desired to be all along. I had to unlearn, I had to let go of all the baggage that I was choosing to carry on. And it transformed my entire life. And my daughter, she'll say now that I got my dad back.
Wow. Well, that is How old are your daughters now?
10 and 13.
Oh my gosh. What a blessing, because I tell you what, I feel like in so many ways, when my daughter was born, and she's my oldest, that's when my journey really began. It's like when she wasn't here yet, I didn't have that why. And it reminds me of when you said your wife came in and told you what your daughter said, and that was it. That was the moment. And I felt that way too. I feel like our children are such a gift because they make it bigger than just us as an individual. If it wasn't for my daughter, I'm quite sure that we wouldn't have published our book.
We would not have published that book. She was the motivation for us to get that fire under us and make it happen.
It's like you want to make the world a better place, but first yourself better. It's like you don't want your child to grow up and sort of give up on life the way that you realized you've been doing, right? You want to instead show them this is a place where possibilities exist. And what a blessing to have you as a father. So thank you so much for sharing that. That was an incredible story. Phil, do you want to ask anything about that? Phil's the better interviewer.
Yeah, it was an interesting story. I didn't know anything about your story before I showed up here today. So it was really interesting. You said that it was the fear and the anger that was making you sick. And so do you feel like it's letting that go is what helped you heal?
Yeah, loving that, first loving it. Energetically, I was holding on to that fear, those past hurts, the anger. I held a lot of anger towards my dad, and it was forgiving myself first, and then forgiving him helped a lot. But as I loved those symptoms and embraced, just the journey that, okay, everything is leading me to this, did symptoms start to resolve very quickly, especially my suffering.
Yeah. I mean, I can really resonate with that. And it's, in our live group, call in the membership last month, you were talking about how I have learned to love my fear. And I was like, oh, that is absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. And I felt like that helped me go one level deeper, or I'm sorry, the pain, not the fear, the pain. It helped me go one level deeper with my relationship with pain, because I've already gone very, very deep into, I accept the pain. I want to go and communicate with the pain, but that really, really helped me. So thank you for that. To go one level deeper and say, okay, I love you, pain. I'm grateful for you, pain. I've been grateful for the lessons the pain has brought, but to choose to just be flat out grateful and loving towards the pain, I feel like has transformed me. And I want to talk for a minute about you mentioning the panic attacks, because this is so common on the ascension pathway. And the thing is, the ascension pathway is like this. You could describe it sort of as like a child's, like a very young child's, like painting or crayon drawing, where it's just like, this is what we want it to look like this, but it looks like, It looks all over the place. And you have those moments like you described where you feel that you are one with all that is, and you just know, and you know, and you know, and you know, and there is no doubt. And you're like, oh, I knew this was possible. I knew it was possible to get to this state. And then when later on you're no longer in that state, you're like, ooh, how did I mess up? Where did I mess up? How can I fix this? How can I get back to what I'm supposed to be? But the truth is that those awakening moments are given to us so that we understand what we are here to move into, so that we know what it feels like. But there's a lot of junk. Energetic junk, mental junk, emotional junk that we have to move out of our bodies, our minds, and our energy fields that's been stored there over decades and truly in past lives as well. And so that's where this comes in. It's the release process, because we want it just to be like, okay, let me anchor in this energy, up, 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 I'm good. But that release process, and it takes a different amount of time for everyone. But I mean, for me, I'm still in it. You know, I'm not beyond releasing yet. And I feel like most of my panic attacks have passed because, like you, I learned how to essentially say thank you, say this is happening for me. And it's not just panic attacks on the ascension pathway. I've had the experience with chills where I'm like, what's happening? What's wrong? Get in a warm bath. Stop it. And that's our natural inclination from the matrix programming we've grown up with, is whatever is happening that's abnormal or different than just expected, let's make it stop, because it can't be good. I don't see anybody else doing this. Let's stop it. Right. And so it's very much designed, actually, this release process, to make us sort of say, nothing outside has the answer. So let me go to God's source within, because nobody else is bringing me the answer. And that's been my experience during these moments, these panic attacks or the chills or whatever it is. You know, nobody has an answer for me. So let me go within. And I found sort of that these are the best opportunities that we have as a human that has been programmed in the matrix to remember that we're here to communicate within. And it's like I.M. explains to me all the time, well, Erin, if you just spend much of your time every day talking to me, then you won't have to experience these awakening moments, these panic attacks, these whatever. And as I've gotten better at anchoring that in every day, I have seen the dissipation of them. But if you're listening and you have panic attacks, like, the best thing to do during that is to go within and say, I trust you, God's source. I trust you. And, just let me know what I'm supposed to do. And I trust that this is unfolding for my highest good. And I know that my perception, like you talked about, when your perception really, really changed and you just chose. And for me, it happened a few years ago when I just chose to say everything's happening for my highest good. And all of a sudden I started seeing how that was true. And I started seeing in the past all these things I had been holding on to. And I didn't even really know I was holding on to them, right? I didn't know that they were still present for me. These people that had hurt me 20 years ago, I didn't know I was holding on to that. But it started coming up, and not for me in one life review like you described, but just one day at a time, I would start to just really feel like I was focusing in on this thing that happened. And then I would start to wonder, well, how did that happen for me? And then I could see sort of the path of how my life unfolded for my highest good because this awful thing had taken place.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have any symptoms now?
No.
It's all gone.
It was all gone in that moment. All pain, all suffering. I knew that I was completely reborn in that moment. Everything from, what I listened to watching movies again, I saw everything in a brand new way. The foods that I ate, my diet immediately changed. Everything was completely kind of renewed, if you will. in that moment.
That's absolutely incredible. And I had a similar moment, I think in 2013. And it's like there's really no way to describe it. I think you did a great job of attempting to describe it. And I've attempted to describe my moment, but it's just like you're filled with everything kind of all at once. And during this sort of filling, there is no room in you to hold the fear and the doubt you've experienced your whole life. And you experience now who you really are apart from that fear and doubt. And it's like, once you experience that, you do go back to being human and go into the releasing of all the whatever else needs to be released and the learning and the growing, but you've experienced it. And so nothing and no one can ever again make you sort of doubt that that is the ultimate truth, right? It's like, well, I've experienced that, so I know. So I know. So I know. And when I describe my moment like that, people are often like, well, what do I do? How do I get it? How do I get that moment myself? Right. And the answer is, of course, that there is no step-by-step method to getting that moment. But the best way that you can put yourself in a situation to have more knowing like that is to start going within more often and start trusting within more often. And like you said, choosing to surrender your life to God, to source, to the entire universe, choosing to understand that you're here for a reason. And it's not just a choice and it's not just a mental thing. It's actually backing yourself with your actions, right? So if it's like, I am choosing to surrender to God's source within me, it's like when you made that choice, you then said, okay, I noticed my habits started to change. I started to change, right? Before you had that moment of essentially complete healing, you made the decision. And it's always a decision. Like we have infinite timelines available for each lifetime, right? But you're going to have essentially two main timelines. And the one timeline is I trust. And the one other timeline is I'm terrified and I absolutely don't trust. Now, we all start off down here and I'm terrified and I absolutely don't trust. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're not in trouble if you're like, oh, I might be there. No, actually, you're even if you think, oh, I might be here, you are actually already on the upswing or you wouldn't be listening here right now. But there does come a time where you move from mental understanding to I'm going to start backing my mental understanding with my actions. I'm going to start moving in the direction I'm led. So talk to me about your coaching business now. How did that come about?
Sure. If I can back up 1 second before I get into that. So I prefaced all of this that I didn't realize what I was doing at the time. It was all within me all along. It's all within all of us. I didn't even realize that I was listening to I Am at the time. But what I realized, there were so many life lessons through all of that. But I realized that I didn't have to listen to that fear and doubt in my head. Sure, it came up. Oh, I'm never going to get better. I just used it and it flipped it around. Oh, I'm getting better faster and faster. And then when those panic attacks came, they were still very scary, of course, but I knew where I had set my destination. That was to get 120% better. No idea how, no idea when. But looking back now, I was being intuitively guided. I knew the next right step, only one step, but I didn't panic about it. I didn't doubt it. I just went along with it. And it became enjoyable. And I started to prove to myself that, okay, after this panic attack, things are going to get much lighter. So I started to prove to myself that, hey, wait a minute, I can lean into these things. I can love this pain, and it results in, being lighter, moving things through, transmuting pain and other things to love. I didn't know about chakras and all of that at the time. It was just.
And I think that's totally unnecessary.
Right.
All the rules about.
I brought that up. Yes.
It's just ridiculous.
Yes.
That's when I started channeling through the energy work that I do and that I teach. I was very specific, like, you don't need the chakras, because I didn't know them. I was like, am I qualified for this? I was like, you don't need that. It's just like every single cell in your body is an energy center. You're an energy being. The idea that there's certain areas that we should work within us to the exclusion of others is not really seeing ourselves as a complete being. And that's what we are. It's seeing ourselves as fractured, which is very much like there's nothing wrong with the energy healing methodologies that have come before on Earth. They were appropriate for that period of the Earth's ascension, which was much younger. It was a time when we were more fractured beings. But the closer that we're getting now to true New Earth, to true ascension, like it's time for us to see ourselves as we really are. And the other thing to know there is I loved everything you said, because you have it within you. You don't need to learn it. You don't need to learn energy work from me. Can you? Yes, but you don't need to. Like, if you go within and allow yourself to be led, you will be led to what is right for you. And there's nothing like it. There is nothing like it at all. And that's also like the more that you trust yourself within, the more that you start to discern what is right for you on the healing journey. And just like I have learned from so many others that were further ahead of me on their healing journey, as I'm sure that now you have, like there's blessing there as well when we share. You're sharing, I'm sharing. Are you sharing, Phil?
Yeah.
Phil shares a lot. Like we light the pathway for others. And what really struck me while you were just talking is how we are given these lows. And when we're in it, it can often feel like I am in this horrible place. The world hates me. Life is miserable. It's never going to get better. And like you talked about, you were thinking about ending it, right? And these are actually our biggest opportunities to connect within, right? Like this is where the universe is saying now, ask now, ask now, ask now for assistance, ask now for help, because we are not programmed at all to ask within for anything. Like we are programmed that's silly, crazy, nuts, and insane. Like we'll put you in a mental institute for that, right? Like this is not acceptable behavior, but it's actually the only behavior that makes sense in our crazy world.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
And, I felt abandoned, alone. And I kept praying to God in the sky like I was taught. And I'm like, well, am I not worthy enough to be healed here? But I realized that I had to do my part in believing and letting go.
Yeah. And I think that it is, the God in the sky idea is, and you said you weren't at all religious. Were you raised religious at all?
I was, yeah.
You were. Okay. So you did have that background. I wasn't, but I understood the concept of the God in the sky. Phil, you understood the concept of the God in the sky.
Well, of course, I think everybody's familiar with that.
But it does. It makes you feel so distant from power. It makes you feel so powerless, worthless.
Tells you you're disconnected,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're nothing. You're an ant on the ground and your life is meaningless. And nothing could be farther from the truth. You know, the thing is, we're such powerful beings.
So powerful, yes.
Shockingly powerful, incredible, like unbelievably powerful. It's so powerful, there's no words for what we actually are. And the programming that runs this world, it needed us to not feel that way in order to have the experiences that we're truly here to have. And so, like, everything that we have been raised to believe is essentially the exact opposite of the truth. And sometimes it takes these really awful situations for us to sort of flip the switch and say, no more. I'm not going to be that anymore. Because when things are sort of comfortable and okay, maybe they're not great, but they're also not awful, there's no reason for us to get up and move. And those of us that have this life purpose that we're here to do something to contribute to the ascension, we are going to have much less comfortable lives than those that are here to do something else. And I think that's part of the most difficult part for people like us is we are asked to overcome a lot to come back within. And we see people around us, people that we love, people that we respect, and it doesn't seem that difficult for them. And that can make it. Now, of course, I have the perspective now to see that everybody has these things to overcome, but I didn't used to, right? It used to seem like it was sort of me and everybody else sort of had it okay. That's what it looked like. And I know now that a lot of people are just keeping those things within, but truly the people that are here with the biggest paths have the biggest things to overcome. And it reminds me of somebody that's in Quantum Lightwork Academy who shared this story of he had been addicted to heroin for, I don't know, he said 5 or 6 years, something like that. Really hardcore addict. And it was something like December 12th, I think, something like that. And you know, we should maybe ask him on as well, because he would be a fantastic conversation. But he said he listened to our audiobook on YouTube, I Create. And later on in the day, he was going to whatever, is that shooting heroin? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you shoot up heroin. Yeah.
Okay. So, and he said he was going to do it. And he said he heard I Am say, no, put it away. You can't ever do that again. And so he put it away and he's been clean now for 3 months. And it's like, yes, when you're at your lowest moment and you're willing to listen, you will be led and everything can change. And that's another program that is so prevalent, is that these things can't change instantly. Like when Phil said, is this really like, you don't have any symptoms anymore? Like, yes, this is possible.
It's interesting how fast things can actually happen when you're in alignment. Like yours happened so quickly. And then he just cut heroin like that. Like how many people do that? Like heroin's so addictive. I know my family has a story. My father was a chain smoker for most of his adult life. And he always swore he would never stop smoking. Everyone wanted him to stop smoking. He said, I'm never going to stop. I'm going to smoke until the day I die. And he was a chain smoker. If you don't know what that means, is you light one cigarette with the end of the one you're smoking. So like you wake up, you put a cigarette in your hand, you have one in your hand all day long. That's what he was. He smoked like 4 packs a day. And he swore he would never stop. And then one day when we were little kids, my sister, apparently, she was a little kid, I don't know, like 4 or 5. And she walked up to him one day and said, Daddy, will you please stop smoking? And he put the cigarette in his hand out and he threw his pack of cigarettes away and he never picked one up the rest of his life. And it's stories like that just amaze me, like how fat, when you have that moment, when you find that why, how fast it can just change you.
And like we talked about earlier, my kids and my family were my why. And that was another thing too that I experienced during that time is I was addicted to caffeine heavily because that's such bad insomnia and nicotine. And I quit them. I never had a desire for that after that. No withdrawals or anything like that. It was just, okay. It died with the old me.
That's incredible.
As I've been on this journey, people talk about the ego death. To me, it wasn't an ego death. It was an ego death of a persona, but an integration of the ego.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I hate the term ego death because it really like implies that there's something wrong, bad, or evil about a part of you. And I think it's just a part of you is lost and a part of you is scared. And it's sort of like embracing that part of you and letting it know you're safe. I love you. It's going to be okay. Let's do this together. And it's very much, I think, seeing the ego as the inner child instead of like as the ego, right? This evil thing. So the ego death is not for me. I'm like, that's not what's going on here.
And the self-love and the self-compassion were extremely healing for some of my symptoms. For me, I know certain symptoms were tied to certain emotions, and certain sensations and things. So as I began to give myself self-love and compassion and not feel guilt for the things that I couldn't do anymore and just accept, okay, this is where I'm at, but this is not who I am. This pain is not who I am. I'm experiencing pain, but it's helping me grow. And I think about being in the gym and then you're sore afterwards. Well, oh, great. I feel sore. I'm growing. Well, I think of it the same way now. This past few weeks, the energies have been, for me, just exploding, and I feel it in my shoulder. So I have tightness in my shoulder, and it's I experience the pain. Well, I'm just thankful for the pain that I get to experience it, and I know that it's meaning something.
Yeah. So tell me about, you're saying that you were starting to connect certain, I can't remember exactly what you said, but it sounds to me like
certain emotions or fears with
certain feelings. Was that what it was? Because I want to talk about that, because it's such an important part of starting to become aware of your system as a whole, that everything is connected. And I experienced the same thing. And I used to not really feel in my body very much. I could feel pain, but the pain felt very disconnected from anything that was real to me. It was like, well, I just hurt. Something's wrong. I must be broken. Instead of understanding that all pain is telling a story, and all feelings are telling a story, and they want to be heard and listened to and cleared. And so I would love to hear how you experience that.
Sure. First off, allow yourself to feel all the emotions. I feel a lot of people get hung up. Well, that's anger. What we resist persists, and I resisted a lot for a long time. As those things would come up, well, what I was shown and what I experienced was, for me, I had really high liver enzymes on my blood test, very high. I wasn't a drinker at that time, no other reason for that. My understanding is that anger is often stored in the liver. So it was causing my liver enzymes to elevate. Now, I did have my labs drawn after that moment, and everything, even things that I didn't have that were normal before I had experienced Lyme, were then normal. And it showed me how much is stored in the body and how much is tied to our emotions and our mental state. So, I had high kidney levels tied to fear. The shoulders are often feeling weighted. I'm trying to carry too much. The legs not feeling supported the legs are our foundation. The physical manifestation for Lyme for me was a lot of self-judgment, self-criticism. If you think it's similar to like an autoimmune disorder, well, it's kind of like the body's attacking itself. Well, in that I was attacking myself. I was very hard on myself, very critical. It's something I learned at a very young age. And so my body, to me, my body was representing that and basically attacking itself. And that created a certain vibrational frequency. It made it very clear that I created my Lyme for me. And why Lyme? People ask, well, why Lyme? I didn't choose it or anything specific like that, but it was the energetic of that physically manifested, that I held in my energetic body and then manifested over time and I call it the check engine light. When these things happen, it's like the check engine light in your car. You have all these sensors, and when something isn't right, your check engine light comes on. It's like, hey, pay attention. You got to address this, or you're going to have, the car's going to break down. Well, our body is a physical vehicle. And I think of it as the same way.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. So really what you're saying is our bodies are trying to take us and shake us and remind us, hey, stuff's going on. Let's address this. Let's not ignore it. But we are taught to ignore, to repress, to cover it up, to put a Band-Aid on it, right? And to say, nothing's happening over here, And like for me, I used to be, whenever I had a headache, I'd be taking the aspirin or the Tylenol or the whatever, right? Like, let's get this out. Let's make that stop. And, I haven't now in years taken anything for anything, right? If I'm experiencing something, let's go deep. Let's figure out what wants to come out. And, I find that some people are ready for that and some people aren't. And wherever you are on that journey is perfectly fine. But I think if you're listening right now and you're like, oh, no, I'm not ready for that. That's okay. Just take a deep breath and say, you know what? Maybe one day, maybe right now by listening, I'm opening up energetically to one day in divine timing, being ready for that. And I think that's another part of I feel like that's kind of part of my responsibility. And as being someone who shares is sharing this is my journey and this is your journey and this is your journey. And you who are listening, you have a journey that's perfect for you. And it doesn't have to unfold like ours. It's going to unfold like yours. And I know for me, when I was newer to this work, to listening to I Am, to the whole spiritual world, I looked at people that were further ahead of me and I felt like, oh, they're better than me. They're doing things I'm not doing. They're doing it and I'm not. And the truth is that if you don't choose, draw a line in the sand at some point and say, I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be and I'm exactly where I am. And thank you for showing me what's possible to anyone who's further ahead, right? Thank you for showing me what's possible. But I am perfectly where I'm supposed to be. This is such a huge part of it. It reminds me of what you were saying about when you really had this knowing that, you know what, I've wanted the bigger this, that, and the other. And all of a sudden I realize I already have everything that I truly need. And that's it. That's sort of the answer we're all looking for. It's not out and I say this because it's easy even when we're on path to get distracted by the flashing billboards along our path, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the people that have the flashy things that are flashing. But the more that we can come back to, I've already got it. I already have exactly what I'm supposed to have in this now moment. This is perfect. And I'm going to continue to expand. Right. And that's not to say that we can't go after those things. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's got to come from an anchor of where I am right now is perfect. Where I am right now is exactly where I'm meant to be. I am grateful for what I have right now. And this goes for you, whether you have like a lot of physical things or very, very little in the physical world. What can you anchor into to be grateful for? Because that's the place you expand from. You don't expand from the place of this sucks and I'm screwed. You expand from the place of I'm so grateful for what I've been given. I'm so grateful for what I've been given.
Yes, absolutely. And that's kind of why I shared my story in the way that I did, is I had to have that level of acceptance for where I was and to be grateful for it. And that wasn't easy to do. And a lot of people go, how can you be grateful for it? Well, I got to choose to just be happy with where I was and realize that's not who I was and that it was going to lead me to a better place. Didn't know how, didn't know when, because those are often questions that come up. For people, well, how, when, let it unfold. And I couldn't connect the dots going forward. But as I look back now, it was like, oh, well, wait a minute. My wife got me colorblind glasses because I used to be red-green colorblind a few months before that. And I'd worn them so much and I would flip them up and down to see what I couldn't see anymore, that I programmed to see color. I'm not colorblind anymore. So that was like a little breadcrumb. Kind of just this unfolding, this beautiful unfolding. Meanwhile, I'm screaming and going, this is awful. I hate this. I want it to end. But looking back on, I wouldn't change a thing. I would go back and do it again. Yeah. But I had to choose to see it as a blessing at that time for it to, I wanted things to change before I got excited or before I believed it, but it happens in reverse.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I feel so many similarities to your story, like so many similarities, because that's exactly how it feels when I look back. I see all the breadcrumbs, but when I was in it, I couldn't see them. And so I think that's why one of the reasons is for people like us, it's so very important to share, to let people know who are in it, that if they keep going, they're going to get to the place and the perspective where they're like, wow, this is all unfolded beautifully. And like you said, I would be excited to go back and live it again, having the perspective I have now, like, oh my goodness. And that reminds me of something that I just think, along with the being grateful in the now moment, starting to understand that our life is a journey, and that if we can start seeing it as like we're driving down the road of life every day, and if we don't stop and look around us and be grateful for the blessings, if it's always about where I'm going, like, okay, maybe I have a vacation scheduled in 6 weeks and I'm going to spend all day long every day dreaming about being on vacation. There's nothing wrong with dreaming about being on vacation, but can you also spend a little bit of time every day just like luxuriating in the good things in your life, just being like, oh, I'm so grateful for these things. And this, because when we talk about, I would love now from my current perspective to go back. It's because I didn't know to do that then. Right? It's because I didn't get the opportunity to do that then because I was so stuck in this sucks, I don't like this. And it reminds me of when I was going to nursing school. Phil and I went to nursing school together, and we had to drive like an hour to get to classes. And that was back when this song by Avicii was on the radio, Wake Me Up When I'm Older. And I would just, it was always on every single time I went. And I just felt that song so deeply that I just wanted to hibernate through the next few years, through going to nursing school. I did not want to experience it. I wanted to wake up when things were better, when we didn't feel so poor, when it just felt like, I didn't feel like such a loser anymore. That's what I wanted more than anything in the world. And now I'll occasionally hear that song and I just go and I mentally go and hug that younger version of me. And I go and whisper in her ear that she's loved and she doesn't have to feel this way. And that song now doesn't resonate with me at all, except for the fact that it reminds me to go love that younger version of me that felt that way. But I know so many people feel that way. But the truth is, where you are right now is leading you to so many blessings. And the thing is, we're programmed in the matrix to believe we're not worthy unless we have the health, the money, the family, all of the things, right? We have to, the house, the cars, whatever it is that everybody else seems to have. If we don't have the 15 Stanley Cups, we are not, have you seen those?
The Stanley Cups?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen.
So if we don't have the 15 Stanley Cups, or even the one, that's not worthy, not good enough. Let's get to a place where we have those Stanley Cups. And I think I've used that as an analogy a few other times because I think it's so hilarious, and I understand they leak too. I understand they leak. But so now I lost my train of thought, but the point is that we essentially have been programmed to feel worthless. And so because we're programmed to feel worthless, we feel like we don't deserve to spend time looking for what we're grateful for right now. Instead, we're looking at all the ways we're not good enough because that's a match for what it feels like is true for us based on our matrix programming. And so this is really like feeling grateful for me used to be like this exercise, sort of reminds me of like doing homework in school. It's like, well, let me write out 5 things I'm grateful for today, right? But I didn't feel grateful. I was trying, and bless that younger version of me who was at least trying. But the truth is, gratitude is a feeling of worthiness. It's letting yourself focus in on something that actually feels good because you're worth feeling that way. But when we're still living that life where it feels like, wake me up when I'm older, when things have gotten better, because it's not my responsibility because I don't know how to make this any better. Who am I? Then it's very, very hard to be in the now moment. And part of the reason is while you're healing that part of you that doesn't feel worthy, it hurts, right? It's painful to look at that. And like when you're describing your Lyme disease and describing choosing, I'm potentially going to leave Earth, it's because it hurt to feel that way. It hurt to be in this body. Everything about it hurt. It was painful. And it was probably painful to see your loved ones' reactions to you. It was the whole thing. Life felt painful. And that is why people in general are looking to avoid, detach, move away. It's why, it's why TV, movies, social media, doing the drugs, the alcohol, all of the things are so very popular and prevalent, is because if you're doing that thing, you're not focusing in on the hurt, which means you're blocking your healing, but at least you're not feeling. So I like to say that allowing yourself to feel is the pathway to healing. It's just, we aren't taught that. We're taught that's bad to feel, so let's not do that. But you've just got to. And you talked about how, movies, everything felt so different. And I just totally resonate with that. Cause we don't watch movies. We don't watch TV. We don't, caffeine, no alcohol, no sugar, no nothing. We're like the weirdest people on earth. But this is how it is, right? Your life changes when you don't need to avoid anymore.
I didn't mindlessly scroll on Facebook anymore. I didn't, try to numb anything. It become a curiosity. Okay, what is this revealing to me now? Anything that I listened to was just this, life became so magical. And that's what I want for everybody, in everybody's time. But it can be so beautiful and easy. And you asked earlier what, made me want to become a coach. It was that we all have that ability to do that. And there's so much we could talk about. We could talk probably for hours because there's diet and everything else we could get into. But, right after that took place, I wanted to, not literally, but shake people awake. Like, oh my goodness, you're missing it. Like, this moment is here. This is it. And I was going forwards and backwards all the time, missing the best parts of life. And there's so much more to life than we've ever been than I was ever told or taught, and to ourselves. And I had to look within. And that's what I love about my journey, is that I would have never, I asked the question, like, why did this happen to me? And I got the answer eventually. Would you have turned and looked otherwise? No, I wouldn't have. And, it was just that embrace and realizing that I could choose to be happy in any situation.
Yeah. And that's major, isn't it? And I think happiness, to me, at least on my journey, has really been tied to allowing myself to feel worthy, because so often it just felt like, I just had so low self-esteem most of my life. And it felt like somebody like that really wasn't deserving of happiness. But happiness, it is a choice, right? It's a choice and it's a perspective. And it has nothing to do with external conditions. And I think that's where it gets a little bit confusing, because it's like we're allowed to be happy on the days that are set aside for being happy. Like, let's look at Christmas. Like, yes, we're allowed to be happy, right? Everybody takes the day off work and they all choose to be happy. And what's interesting to me is that a lot of people don't even know on a day that we choose to be happy, how to be happy, because they don't have any practice. And then what I see is then we have to look to children, because children instinctively know how to be happy. But then I look at the difference for our children before TV and after TV. And I remember I was worried that our children were becoming depressed when they were watching TV all the time. And now we were just like talking about it last night. They haven't had TV for a few months now. And it's like, they are so happy. They're the happiest children in the world. They are so freaking happy. And it's a little scary, like to see that, this is
like when they're watching TV, they didn't know how to play. They didn't know how to have fun and enjoy life. And when we cut off the TV, which was a really hard decision to make. I mean, it was a scary decision because, it's like we relied on it. And it was the best decision we ever made for our kids, because it didn't take very long. All of a sudden, they just completely changed into different people. They're happy all the time. They're playing all the time. They're joking all the time. They don't fight anymore. Like, they rarely fight. When they were fighting every day. And now they just have so much fun. It's like they know how to be kids now, and they know how to play, and they're using their imagination. And it was like, they didn't know how to do that before. And it was like really scary. And I've seen the difference between when they're watching TV, they had all these screens, and how they don't. And it kind of terrifies me for the generation right now, because I know that's what's happening to so many kids. It's like sucking their childhood away from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, and I've observed this in my kids, is like, we'll watch the Hallmark Channel or something like that, innocent enough, right? Mm-hmm. But my oldest started to get this idea that was happiness. So that the house had to be decorated to the 10 of all of that. And she's like, well, Dad, why don't you do that? I'm like, well, this is not a priority. I don't have, I don't have the time right now. And she was really upset. And she started to, feel that like that was what happy was. It had to be everything this way. And I really observed a lot of that, of like, she's putting she's learning from this TV of like what happiness is supposed to look like in it. That's so far.
It's kind of shocking. It's so funny because they call it TV programming, and I never noticed that. It's literally programming us, and that's the truth. Like our children watch TV, from the time they were, I don't know, Maddie was probably 1. so then it was always on when Leo was little. And it was like, I was just trying to tread water with them, and I didn't know what to do. Like it was so overwhelming. And so it's not like I was like, yay, let's watch TV. But then eventually it was like, I need a break. Let's watch TV. And it turns out now that there's no TV, we don't need any breaks anymore because they're happy all of a sudden. They're not looking to us to solve their problems anymore. Now all their solutions come from within, which is really interesting. It's like, and like we were both raised watching TV, but it was different because when we were kids, like Saturday morning, yes, Friday night, yes, there was programming on for kids, but during the day there wasn't anything on for kids. But now with like the streaming services, 24 hours a day, you can watch whatever you want. And so it's really a different scenario. Like I can remember we were at the doctor's office maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and there was like a 8-month-old baby in a stroller next to us in the waiting room with a tablet that it's like, it's playing a game on the tablet. It's like 8 months old. I was like, what is going on? Yeah, it is alarming. And it sort of makes sense though, as far as where we are in the ascension, everything's ramping up. All the energies are ramping up. So that means that everything that wants to be cleared is getting louder. And so what I see is this is clearing. Clearing is painful. It's messy. It's awful. And so, yeah, we're going to have a lot of children that are very, very deeply programmed by all of the electronic options right now, but it's going to lead to faster crises, essentially. And like we're talking about, these crises are not actually a bad thing. They're what open up to within. And so what I see is, we're going to have mass awakenings as these children get older. They're going to start mass awakening. And part of the reason will be because they were so deeply programmed so fast, it's going to create these fast awakenings. And so it's all going to end up being a blessing. So it's like, we talked about this. I had in a podcast that we haven't yet published that's coming out soon. By the time this one comes out, it'll be out already. But I put a little clip of it on YouTube about how we stopped the kids' TV and this happened, and somebody left a comment like, "Oh, you haven't found the answer. This isn't whatever." And it's just so funny how people get triggered and they don't want to see. And we talk about this a lot because, I understand I get triggered sometimes and I don't want to see, but usually after I sit with it for a little while, I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. We didn't want to make the decision to take away the TV because it felt scary. It felt different. We didn't watch any TV, but we were afraid that if we took it away for the kids, like we would never have a break. And it turned out to be the exact opposite. But that's interesting because so often we as humans reject expansion and change and following our guidance because it's unknown, because it's scary, right? And what is funny to me, and I would love to hear your opinion on this, Ricky, what is funny to me is whenever we follow our guidance, it always ends up being okay. Even if it doesn't work out the way that we thought it would, it always ends up being okay. Like we are supported, even if the support doesn't look the way we expected it to. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that resonates with me with just surrendering, because in that surrendering, I was, during those couple of weeks that I was going through that, I was facing fears, but I wasn't opening the closet. Well, when I surrendered, I opened the closet to everything. And I realized, the only thing I had to fear was literally fear itself. I was creating the fears. And it was finally taking that leap off the cliff, like, all right, I'm done. I'm just going to fall and trust that something's going to catch me. And it proved to me in that moment that absolutely everything is truly working out for us. And if we can just let go and embrace the unknown, that's when life becomes truly magical, in my opinion. Because, I started waking up, you mentioned Christmas. That's how I describe it, is I started waking up like every day was Christmas because I had no idea what was going to happen, but I knew something beautiful is going to take place one way or another. And that day may, quote unquote, look bad, but one way or another, it's going to unfold in this beautiful way. And I'm like, curiously childlike, like, ooh, I saw everything brand new. Even though the tree that I was standing next to was the same tree, it was brand new. And that just showed me how conditioned that I was, and took things for granted and didn't trust in the unknown. So I was a very controlling person. I tried, well, this has to be this way, or I got triggered. And I had to let go of all of that. And I found out that love is what catches us. Love is what truly exists.
Well, I would love to hear more about that. Okay, so tell me about how did that switch go for you when you're somebody who is easily triggered whenever you didn't have control. So after your big moment of healing, how did that go? Was it automatic? Was it easy? Was there any resistance within you?
It was automatic and easy. During that time, I became nobody, no place, no time, nowhere. I have this visual of this ball of energy and these chains over it. And the chains were removed and just raising up. And it was easy transition for me. But I think just because of such the drastic letting go and just fully surrendering to it. But I still had the persona, which I love. I didn't, because shortly after that, I remember thinking to myself, well, this is not what I've been taught in church. I still got to question and doubt, which led me to, just learning more and understanding more. And the fear of, I'm going to go backwards and things like that would come up. Sure. But it was ultimately, just fully embracing life and realizing there is absolutely nothing to fear. That made it an easier transition for me.
Yeah. And I think that's why essentially so many of us on this path are called to these sorts of really, really deep, dark situations that are so heavy. And it's because that when we are at rock bottom, when we're at a horrible low, if we can choose in that moment to surrender and release the fear, then the fear really loses its power, right? Because that has been my experience, that I've done so many things that have scared me, terrified me, especially over the last few years. But it's kind of almost in a way, and I'm not going to say easy to do them, but it is easier than I could imagine to do them because I already overcame the biggest fear of my life. And if I can do that, every fear after that is insignificant because I already did it. It's already done. And so it's not that fear doesn't come up for me, but it comes up for me and I'm like, oh, hello. Oh, hello. It's you, old friend, And it's like, well, we've already been down this road. We're not going to stop because you're popping your head up. Let's go. It's like hand in hand. Let's go do this. And, sometimes it'll be like me eyes watering. It'll be me like quaking a little bit. Like I just keep going. And it's like, it's not that the fear isn't there. It's that the fear no longer has the power to stop me. And would you say that that's sort of similar for you? Oh,
absolutely. Resonates deeply. I still have the fear thoughts that would come up, especially about sharing. And it sounds like, from the videos that I've watched of both of you, that you've had part of that, it took a few years to fully say, we are God. There is no separation. Yeah. And to share, but it comes up and I thank it for coming up. Okay, thank you. You're showing me who I'm not, or what, the opposite. So therefore I know what the opposite therefore is. Sometimes I don't know what I want, but a fear of something that I don't want comes up and it's like, oh, I know I don't want that. So I must want this. So I used it, to my advantage, if you would. when it would come up. Like, hello, old friend. I realized that I don't have to really pay attention to you, when that was the primary voice that I listened to in my head. Oh, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
And it seemed like it was the louder one, and then became the quieter one. And then I am became the prominent voice.
Yeah. And that is how it goes. Like what you described. It's like there's a time when that fear voice is the loudest voice and you're saying yes to it. Like that was my whole life. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Yep. 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 I looked like a bobblehead, yep. Yep. Whatever you say. Right. And the first time is going to be the first time. And yeah, for us sharing, yeah, terrifying. It took us 8 years to get there. But once we did it the first time, it became easier every time because we had already done it. And we found out that the world didn't explode around us. I had all these fears and doubts that like, if we shared, our life would be destroyed, like bomb dropped on our life destroyed. And no, life kept going. Nothing really changed. I'm like, well, okay, I guess that fear wasn't real. I've been carrying it around for 8 years and imagining all these scenarios, and I guess it wasn't real. That's fascinating. Okay. So that means I guess it's okay for me to go and talk about this. And I continue to dissolve more and more and more layers around sharing. And like Phil, when he started doing the videos with me like that was scary. And and I mean, you have stepped into it so much.
It gets easier. Like the first time you overcome a fear, it's the hardest, but it's like overcoming fear isn't like a one-time thing. It's you do it once and then it's going to come up again and you're going to have to overcome it again. And it gets easier every time you do it. But it's like, it's not like, oh, I was afraid, overcame this fear and now it's gone. Mm-hmm. It's like you overcome it and then you're good. And then it comes back and you have to overcome it again. And it comes back and it's like a back and forth. And it's like you keep going back to it. But as long as you lean into like a patience with yourself, like I'm going to keep moving forward and slowly I'm going to whittle away at this until it's not there anymore. But it's going to take a lot of times before it's finally out of your system.
Yeah. And I think that's what stops so many people that have great stories from sharing, is this feeling that like, shouldn't it just feel great? And I think that whenever we're expanding, there is resistance. There is the old that needs to be released, and you're feeling that. That's what the fear is. It's just the resistance. It's who you have been. That's like the popping up and being like, no, remember you're this, remember? And it's like, no, I'm expanding into that. Remember you're this. And it's just, you just have to push through that resistance. And so it's normal. Gosh, when I started making videos 4 or 5 years ago, however long ago it was now, I can never remember. I had this trick, and I saw it somewhere. You smile for 30 seconds.
Yes. And it tricks.
Yes. And the muscles, the smile muscles, and it worked. If you smile for 30 seconds, then you're just going to naturally sort of be elevated and lifted. And then I would make the video. And that's how I started making videos. And it really worked. I was so grateful that I had that little trick, because it got me through the beginning of making videos. But, there wasn't an accident that I was led to that little trick, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really helped me, is hearing your story and journey is like, wait a minute, she's experienced it too. Like, there's nothing wrong with me being fearful of sharing my story. It took you 8 years. I mean, it's taken me years. But I learned so much along the way. But, when you make a new decision that's away from fear, get ready. It's going to be uncomfortable. And that's where I learned to embrace uncomfortability. Like, I celebrate as an opportunity. Okay, great. Here's an opportunity to grow then if I'm uncomfortable. And that's where I learned to love pain and uncomfortability. But also too, it's going to, like you said, Phil, it's going to come back around. And I like how that, I didn't used to like it, but it's given me that opportunity again. Did you learn the lesson? Are you sure? And I feel that's why, when we fear something, what we fear draws near. it's helping us prove to ourselves that, hey, there's actually nothing to fear. And a fear of death is a big one. Mm-hmm. And since I got to experience that, I no longer fear dying, because I know nobody actually dies. And it's a beautiful, amazing experience.
Yeah. Oh, I totally resonate with that, because I had the same experience when I was 6 or 7 and I found out people died. Maybe I was a little bit younger. I carried that fear around for 30 some years. That was my biggest fear, because I wasn't raised religious. And so my parents were both atheists, and I never had another thought in my head about it, never considered it. It's just like, yeah, that's nothing exists. And so there was no afterlife in that. It was just sort of, you turn to dust. And I was so afraid. And when I had my moment in 2013, that was very similar to yours, it was like, oh, well, there's no real death. You leave this body and you go straight back to God's source. Oh, okay. There's nothing to be afraid of. And it wasn't too long after that I really surrendered and said, okay, well, if I'm not afraid of dying anymore, I am ready whenever that's supposed to happen, and that was a journey. That was like a deep healing journey. And so I look at all those years, those 30 some years of that deep fear of death, like terrified of death. That was definitely my biggest fear. And I can see Erin in that, just being so afraid at all these random moments, like almost having panic attacks sometimes around the idea of death, even though there was nothing going on that was going to cause my death. I was just like, I'm afraid. And I see what a blessing every day of that fear was, because it was leading me to this huge surrender and release moment. It was leading me to seeing that my fear isn't actually real. And like, I'm just feeling really honored to talk with you, Ricky, because as soon as you came into the membership, I could feel your energy. And I could feel, even though I hadn't heard your story, I could feel your story energetically. And I could also feel sort of just not sort of, I see where you are, sort of on the enlightenment mountain. And there's very few people on earth that are where you are. And it is really cool to talk with you. And I mean, this is just such an honor for me, because what you have done here, it is such a blessing on earth for the entire human collective, that you are holding this energy, that you have made the choices that you've made, that you're choosing to share your story, that you're choosing to open your coaching to others. I mean, you are such a blessing here on earth. And I am truly honored to be in the same space as you.
Thank you. Well, it's definitely mutual, because until I came across you, I felt kind of alone in some ways, which is fine. It taught me a lot. But the same, as soon as I came across, I think the first thing I came across was your book on YouTube. And I start listening to it. I'm like, well, yes, like there's so much that resonates here. And so when I came into the group, and normally I wouldn't share the intention. I wasn't going to share that I had the intention to come on the podcast. I kept actually, in a way, resisting it. And then it's like was like, hey, no, go ahead. Just say it. Because it's like I knew it was already going to take place. So I feel that as well.
Yeah. And that's, you know what? We all have these moments. I have them too, where I feel the guidance and it's like, oh, just do this. And I'm like, no. But I know now, like, and I'm so proud of you for doing it. Like, you just have to say yes. You just have to do it. And the faster you do it, the faster all that like agony of should I not just melts away. Because once you do it, it melts away. And so anyway, I'm celebrating you for following that guidance. But truly, it is our honor, because I mean, as we continue ascending as a collective, more and more people are stepping into this energy, but we are the ones that are going first right now. Those of us that are activated and sharing right now, we are going first. And that is no small feat. For each of us that chooses to share, and this goes for every single person that's listening right now, like I hope that if you have a call in your heart to share, that you take a deep breath and start sharing. Because, and however that looks, it doesn't have to be making YouTube videos, right? It could be just sharing within a group that you're in, sharing with someone you love, right? Because sometimes there's a feeling, especially in our like crazy social media world, that if you don't have 5 million people watching your videos, there's no point. And that couldn't be further from the truth. When I started sharing, nobody had ever heard of me. I didn't, like no one had heard of us. This was not a thing, and I just kept talking about it. I am like, don't worry about it that nobody's listening. Just keep talking about it. And we did. And we continue to grow. But the really cool thing about sharing, and something that I didn't understand earlier on in my journey, that I wish somebody would have told me is that you aren't given more than you can hold. You're given enough to continue to expand, but not more than you can hold. So that looks like starting to open your perspective, to see that when you are sort of new to sharing, say you're sharing because you feel called to start some sort of entrepreneurial business around something that you're feeling called to, right? And you go out there and you start sharing and you feel like not too many people are listening. What can happen is you might say, oh, this is pointless. Maybe I should stop. But if you keep going and keep trusting as you are called to share, people will start slowly being brought to you. But the thing is, you have so many little lessons to learn at the beginning of your sharing that you can't handle a huge influx of people. You might want a huge influx, but you haven't learned all the lessons of how to hold those people yet. And so this is something huge that I see so many people that are called to share. And that's, since we're talking about sharing, I just really want everyone to know this and be wrapped in the love of this truth, that there are no accidents, that if it feels like nobody would be interested, it just means that you're at the beginning of the journey. And if you look in clarity at people that have the millions of people listening to them sharing, you'll see they've been sharing for 15, 20, 30 years. Look at the big names in spirituality. And you'll see they've been doing this 20 or 30 years, at least 10 at the minimum, you're going to see. And if you can see that, then I want you to imagine what must it have looked like when they started. And understanding that this is the normal path. And we tend to get lost in this field of magical manifestations and assume if we don't do it big right away, it means we're not good enough and we should stop and figure out how to do it better. When, well, I know because I'm saying this all from experience. This was part of my journey to understand this. And I see it every day in people that are called, they have a big purpose, they are called to share, and they have those same feelings that I felt in the beginning of my sharing journey of not being good enough, not being fast enough. But I'm telling you, the lessons that I've had to learn, has it been 4 or 5 years? I don't know. It's been some amount of years that we've been doing this sharing. And I'm going to have to do the math after this call. But so then I'll know for the rest of the year. But there have been so many lessons we've had to learn in order to hold people to the degree we're holding them now. I could not, if you gave me the business and the amount of people that I handle right now, 3 or 4 years ago, instant collapse, instant failure, because I could not have held them. Because each person that you're holding energetically, that's an energetic weight on you. And it's not, for me, it's not a weight that anymore is like, this doesn't feel heavy. But 3 or 4 years ago, it would have been so freaking heavy, I would have collapsed. And so I was given what I could handle and a little bit more to expand. And that's what it's been every step of the way. And now I have that perspective. I can look back and see like, holy cow, the breadcrumbs are there. Like this has unfolded perfectly divinely for us. And like, what a blessing that back then when I was manifesting and trying to create more and more and more, I wasn't given more than I could handle at once. And that's what everybody needs to know about sharing, is it's okay to share exactly where you are, exactly who you are, that it's okay. It's okay. And the people that are meant for you in that time, in that moment, they're going to feel you. They're going to feel you. Oh, and that's, I mean, apparently I'm just going to talk about sharing for 2 more hours. We're about to wrap it up, but
we could talk for hours. I know.
But okay. So like there are 50 million rules out there on how to share to get attention on you. And the best thing that you can do when you're coming from authentic, real soul truth is throw every single one in the garbage. And I talk about this in Quantum Money Business Blueprint, where I highly recommend that to everybody who's listening, who's interested in sharing, because I tell you exactly energetically what's really going on. And it is like the deepest teaching on earth. But anyway, if you trust that you are enough and you speak truth from your heart, then nothing that anybody tells you about how to build a business online matters at all. None of it. None of it. But you got to have the guts to speak from here and ignore all the flashing billboards. Now, what was interesting is when Truth, One Law, I Create, ready for publication, I spent about 3 months doing all the research that I could possibly do on Google for self-publishing, because we decided we were going to self-publish. We didn't want to be traditionally published because was very clear. You don't want to give anyone else control over the words, because if you're traditionally published, you're giving the rights to your work to a company that then can change those words however they want. And was like, hard stop. No, it has to be you guys. So I read everything I could read about self-publishing. And what I learned was if you didn't have a big audience, you may as well just not even do it. Because all that matters, quote unquote, all that matters in self-publishing is the launch. If you don't have a big launch, the book will never sell. And I didn't have it. I had been on Instagram for like 2 months at the time. And I think I had 100 followers and I was following them all back. And that was all that was going on in my internet world. Right. And so I launched the book at 99 cents and I sold 15 copies the first 2 weeks. And, that was about it. And I was like, well, I guess I'm not having a big launch. And said, it doesn't matter. Just keep talking about it. And I'm like, okay. And I did. And now, over 1 million people have read the book. And it wasn't because I followed any of the rules at all. I just kept talking. And I am not much of an editor. If you watch our YouTube videos, there's not a lot of editing going on. I do have an assistant now who does some editing, but it's not like we don't have fancy editing, right? We don't have fancy much of anything. And we continue to grow because we're real. And the people that are meant for us can feel that. And that is direct opposite to most people out there. Even if you look at most names that are big in the spiritual world, a lot of people that are led to me will be like, I don't resonate with them. And it's true. I don't resonate with most of them either. And it's because they lost their authenticity because they are, they're traditionally published or they're whatever, and they allow other people to control their words. And there's so many other factors there as well. That's not always just that. But the point of the matter is that Earth right now, the human collective, needs more people that are being real, that aren't worrying about the fine print and the fancy editing and the this formula and that formula, and you got to hook them in 3 seconds. That say, I don't know how to hook somebody. I don't know how to hook somebody in 3 seconds. That's going to be me. I'm going to raise my hand. I don't know how to hook somebody in 3 seconds. And if I would have got caught up and lost in how to hook somebody in 3 seconds, we wouldn't be doing this. Your story matters. Your story matters. Everybody's story matters. But if you think what matters is hooking somebody in 3 seconds, your story is never going to see the light of day. So I hope everybody takes this and starts sharing their story, because your story matters. And there are souls out there waiting to receive it. There are souls waiting to receive it. And when you start sharing, you're going to get a little bit of a trickle of souls that are like, ooh, what's going on over here? Be grateful for that trickle. Thank you, thank you, thank you for this trickle. Thank you. Instead of, what am I doing wrong? Why aren't there 5 million souls here yet? X, Y, and Z has 5 million souls. I must not be as good. No, thank you for this trickle. Thank you. Thank you for this trickle. And that's what I wish I would have known at the beginning of my journey.
Because we've been through all those emotions. Like, what are we doing wrong? Why don't we have 1 million followers? And we have to remind ourselves, patience, patience. It's coming. It just takes time. And it's like, even before I met Erin, I had a journal that I'd write down. Things would come to me. And I was like channeling, but I didn't know that. I'd write things down and I knew it wasn't me. I'm like, I don't know where this came from, but it's not me. And one of the things I wrote down that to this day, I don't remember most of the things I wrote down, but one thing I do remember I wrote down is patience is power. And I was like, where'd that come from? I never heard that before, but I wrote it down. And I always go back to that and remember that. I have to remind myself, Phil, patience is power, because you want it right away. You want it to happen like an explosion, you want like success right away. You want the followers right away. You want everything to happen so fast. And I have to always go back and remind myself, Phil, patience is power. Just lead into patience and it'll slowly come. Build it one brick at a time, and just patience is power. And I always have to go back to that, remind myself, because you get stuck in like, I want it now. I want it faster,
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Ricky, well, tell everybody how they can find you.
Sure. Absolutely. And thank you again for having me on here. It's so much fun. Best way to reach me is on Instagram, Power of You Coach. Same for my email, ricky@thepowerofyou.coach. And then my website, thepowerofyou.coach.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything you would like to say to close us out?
Embrace life, surrender to it, know that you're on the right path. And thank you all so much for listening and for having me on here. It's such an honor.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ricky. This is a really great experience. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for listening. We love you so much, and we can't wait to see you next week. Thank you for joining us for the We Are All God podcast, with new episodes dropping every Sunday morning. And remember, you are more powerful than you've ever imagined.